Super. Tonight is a bit of an experiment. Hope you don't mind being part of an experiment. But I thought it would be a relevant one anyway. I'm going to get stuck into one of the most talked about, even within this room tonight, topics of conversation in the world at the minute for student age people, and that is travel, and hopefully going to do a bit of wrestling with it together. And because it's, I've been thinking about it for the last 6 months or a year, some material, I've been writing stuff down and formulating different things, but I've never actually, in contexts like this, been chatting with folk on a whole evening type thing. So feel free to take this where you want to. If you have a question, if you want to discuss something that you think might be slightly off-road, still, let's go for it. Off-road travels are some of the best travels to go on, so feel free to take it where we want it this evening, and we'll see where we get to. But when you say turn to the person beside you to start with, if you're going to escape from don't worry, I'll chat to you. If you're going to escape from exam mood, escape from its stress of uni term time kicking on and deadlines and everything else, where would you escape to? Where's on your bucket list to escape to, and why? Or maybe if you've just been home from travelling the world, which some of you have within the last 6 months, where was the top on your list you'd tell everyone to head to? So to the person beside you, or in threes or whatever, go for it. Give us some snapshots, give us some flavours. If you're going to take us to one place in the world that you haven't been before, or maybe that you have, where would it be and why? Anyone?
The top of the Eiffel Tower.
Top of the Eiffel Tower. And have you been?
Yeah.
And why do you take it there?
Because I feel like I'm flying and free and just...
Class.
Yeah, the only place I'm not afraid of heights is that.
What?
So...
Crazy. Cool. Anyone else?
Nepal. Just like go for like a spiritual experience.
Cool.
Yeah.
Class.
All the cars
Anyone else?
North Korea.
Oh. Well, and why?
Are you talking about?
For the very reason that you ask, because people don't normally go to North Korea. People have an
Okay.
idea, go anywhere in the world, don't go to North Korea. Why? Go and find out. If you behave yourself, you will come back. It's not that you can causing trouble. I won't be smuggling in Bibles, sorry God. But if you just believe what you want, what they want you to believe, and behave and experience what that culture is like, then you can come out and then you can give your judgments and say they're all crazy. But no, people didn't go to Russia like 20, 30 years ago. And the same like Korea.
Of course, for a good reason.
Fascinating.
And there's two places that was more interesting. Say if we wanted to have the more interesting conversations. I want to go to like the top of the Eiffel Tower. I said I want to go to North Korea. Pretty sure that I would get more of an interest.
Ooh, fighting talk. Anyone going to? If I'm still allowed to use this verb, anyone going to trump North Korea?
Puerto Rico.
America?
Puerto Rico.
Oh, Puerto Rico. Sorry. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it's relaxing. And Thailand also. Relaxing. Yeah, it is. Like if you go to the knot, like yeah, it's the knot.
Cool. Fun. Well, I guess our culture and society is just saturated by. This is just familiar to everyone. The Lonely Planet symbol, the destinations that people if we're not travelling currently, so often people are posting Facebooks of their travels, or dreaming of the next holiday or the next travel that they can get to. It's the thing that our modern world has made so possible.
Well, it isn't, that'll be in there.
That'll be in the 2017 one.
Should be all of them.
There we go. See you trip to Barbados. Here we go. But for the Christian, I guess I asked the question. Well, what should travel be for us? Where do we find travel in the Bible? What does God say about travel? And so, just gonna spend the next 10 minutes. I will go. Why not? We'll split down here. So Lucas and the gals can take one. You can go to the other table if you want, and the lads can scribble on this one. And what you're looking to jot down as many times off the top of your head that you can think of travel coming up in the Bible and where and what's happening, just roughly. You don't have to. Please don't start Google searching and getting all serious about it. Just from the top of your heads, so you can take your scribble tips and. And if you're feeling very arty, you can even represent it in some
Abraham.
Exodus?
form or something.
Is it any type of travel now, not just like
Abraham.
Any type of travel whatsoever.
Or wherever.
Or wherever.
Is it
I think it's like, what was there?
Yeah,
All
all
the
of
weather
it.
for a couple of days, wasn't it?
Wrong up.
Oh yeah.
we were conferring?
And then fleeing away to Egypt.
Egypt.
Here. Give us one of your travel examples.
You go to the animals first. Whale, donkey.
Oh, explain some more. Explain some more.
So we've got Jonah and the whale.
The types of
Jonah,
travel,
and then
just for that, when you get out in the water.
The witch.
Water-based
Jesus
travel.
via water to boat. Jesus on donkey to city.
You have Jonah and the whale.
Jesus like being a child. Wait, which one?
Passover. Or Passover. What other animal ones do I have?
The whale?
You said
You did, yeah.
Cool, that's a few. This group, a few more. What did you have?
The Israelites and the Exodus. Abraham.
We have that.
Camels.
We have.
Abraham, where did Abraham go from?
Well, Abraham's traveled from places to seven places.
Yep,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, he spent most of his life on the road. Yeah.
That's the last one.
Through the wise men.
Yep, indeed.
The what's the missionary journeys. Paul, yeah.
Yep, constantly on the road.
Just Elijah in the chariot to heaven. Don't worry, we got it there already.
Indeed. Pretty cool destination.
Prince of Egypt?
That's the movie, guys. It's not the Bible.
Yeah, which prince? Based on true events. Which prince are you talking about?
Cool. Well, that gives us a flavour, and I guess if you start to read your Bible with eyes open to travel as a framework, right from early on in the Bible, in Genesis, right the way through Revelation, you've got different things going on that are all kind of travel related. So one of God's first commands, be fruitful and multiply. What does multiplication involve? Well, it's going to involve a spreading out across the earth to some degree. So nearly first command there, God's all about travel. He's all about filling the earth. Then, as you said, we've got the ancient Israelite fathers and Abraham. We've got God's people being forced out through punishments to the desert to wander in the wilderness. So travel is sometimes a punishment from God. We've got Abraham and Jacob, and people are on their travels, but they send Isaac back to the land where godly young women are. And so Isaac's travel is all on dating trips, and he finds his wife at a nice well. And in fact, several times I think it's Jacob also finds his wife at a well as well, and Moses finds his wife at a well too. So lots of travelling to wells for dating purposes and for finding godly women. 1 Kings 18:27. Does anyone have a Bible or even a phone that they could flick that up on? 1 Kings 18 and verse 27. While you do that, I guess we have Ruth, the story of Ruth, the story of migrant travel. So she's famine, she's a foreigner in a land, she's journeying as women, struggling in a male-dominated society where all of your male relatives have died. It's a very touching and real story. There are raiding parties and the judges that travel to judge as divine justice, God using them under his sovereign control to judge. 1 Kings 18:27, who has it?
At noon Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said, surely he is a god. Perhaps he is in deep thought or busy or travelling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened.
Yeah, so there's tons of comical verses in the prophets and how they deal with people, but Elijah's got a sacrifice that they're wanting fire to come down from heaven. They're all doing their dances around it, the prophets of Baal and the false prophets to their gods, praying that fire would rain down, and Elijah taunts them and says, hey, maybe your god's away travelling. That would be a shocker, but I think somewhat describes what some people think God's like, just someone who's absent, an absentee landlord off on his travels across different places. So, I mean, you can work away, we're gradually working our way through the Psalms. Some of the Psalms, Psalm 121 through to 134, they're songs of ascent. They're of the time when the Israelite people were going up to the feasts in Jerusalem, up windy, narrow roads, the road that the robber or robbers or gangs would jump out on people, and the road that the Good Samaritan would have walked down to help the person on the side of the road. Those type of hairy experiences where the sun sets early because the mountains are blocking out the sun, and you're freezing half the day, roasting the other half, and on your travels up for a big music festival in Jerusalem, the city, and to enjoy the time with God's people there. So there's such a diverse range, and if I'd be surprised if you couldn't take a single book of the Bible and you couldn't link it to travel in some way. There's Song of Solomon. How did Solomon, many of the people who came to hear his wisdom travelled from miles away. And then Jonah, I think a few of you had escaping God through travel, or thinking he could escape God through travel. So then on into the New Testament, more obvious examples, you've got some of the missionary journeys, even Jesus travelling about the place. What way does the gospel uniquely goes out at a unique time in history? How does the gospel spread so quickly? Well, arguably it's because the Roman roads were perfect for travel. The travel routes were already set. The Romans were all about their travel. And how does the gospel get so far so quickly? Yes, the power of the Holy Spirit undergirds everything, but also God uses human circumstances, and so the language of the Greeks, the road system already in place, the travelling caravans of traders who would have passed by. And so the gospel was needing something to fast transport it out to the world, and God was graciously using even what was in place. And I guess we could go on and talk about the journey to life in faith, as the Bible talks of it as a journey, as something that we travel along the road to. So on every page, nearly on every page of this, certainly in every book, I would nearly contend travel is at the heart of the Bible, and of at who God is and how he does stuff. in the world. But back to your next door neighbour again. What's the problem with all of what we've just discussed? So we're coming to it as Christians in UL in 2016. What's the problem with the travel that we've just discussed? Back to your next door neighbour. What's the difference, or what's the problem looking at these examples as a Christian in 2016?
We were saying like mostly we travel now for pleasure or relaxation or cultural experience, whereas this was mostly necessity or like God's work or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts?
Saying, like it was all with purpose rather than just sightseeing.
Okay, yep.
We were just talking there about how nowadays it's even easier to do way more traveling than anyone in the Bible did, really. I don't even have to travel. I can talk to anyone I want in any part of the world almost from here.
Cool. Agreed.
Taking the experience of the travel, whereas they're trying to go and just travel to get somewhere.
Yeah.
They would have probably met a lot more people on the way.
Mm.
You were saying, like, as
Interesting.
often you just sit beside somebody in an airplane, that's the only person that you might engage with, maybe. But it's quite a lonely journey. You know where you're going, you have your itinerary kind of laid out, you don't need to ask direction, you don't need to ask for help. You have your own money to be able to stay at places rather than hoping for lodgings somewhere. So it's not as an engaging adventure as what these guys look like.
Depends on the culture. You can still find stuff like that around the place, and it's cool when it does happen. It's weird, but it's cool when the whole bus is trying to talk to you or talk to each other.
Yeah. I remember walking into Harkar Place in Tunisia, and the guys literally couldn't understand. It was myself and Dan Ross, some of you know him, and we stood there, and the guys were like, "Why are you here?" The car hire guys, and we're like, "Well, we want to hire a car, like we said in our email." And they're like, "But why are you here?" And we're like, "Well, we want to see your country." And they're like, "Why do you want to see our country?" And I'm like, "Your country's beautiful." And they're like, "But every other tourist is up in the hotels up there, and they stay there. Like, no one does this. Like, you must be up to something." And so, yeah, they just expected hotel break, stay in your hotel, package holiday, but not actually to. But yeah, different cultures, different things. And so that's the tricky thing, isn't it? We want to say God's passion about travel if we want to justify our urges, our yearnings of our heart, our desires for the world. We want to say God's all about that, and yet I guess I tend to find two types of person in the Christian scene, and perhaps I pit a dichotomy against each other slightly. Two extremes of person. I tend to find. And as I searched online over the last 6 months here for different resources, I tend to find there's a type of Christian who says, well, unless you're doing evangelism, unless you're doing mission, unless you have a great purpose to justify your travel, it is sinful. Don't touch it with a barge pole. You should be doing evangelism. Get on with it. Stop dreaming of this. You're made for heaven. Look forward to heaven. Don't worry about this earth. It's going to burn anyway. So that's on one side of it, and some of those serious issues that they raise, and very valid concerns, and good on them. On the other hand, meet some who would say, well, God's all about travel. Travel's brilliant. He's given us a good world to enjoy, and if He'd given us this world, well, why wouldn't He want us to go off and enjoy it? To guilt trip ourselves about about anything else, or to stop doing it, would be to be against the very grain of who God is and what He would want for His children to enjoy. So let's just get out there and enjoy the world and do as much of it as we can before we kick the bucket. And perhaps we could split back into twos or threes again. What have both of those people? What have one person understood correctly about God, and what have they misunderstood about God for both of those people? So back in your twos and threes, go for it. What have either of those people grasped or not grasped? Fire something out.
First guy that we are here to evangelize. I think that's true. You think that's true? Yeah.
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 She was like, yeah.
And the other guy that we are, it's good to enjoy the earth.
Yep. So both of those are true things. Yep. We can glorify God through both. Yep. Any other comments?
You see, if this kind of idea that, you know, going out on a mission team or going out to travel to specifically evangelize or do some work of some sort, like, it's really, really good in itself, but in some respects it's slightly twisted because, you know, you can still do just as much evangelistic work and taking a nice sunny holiday to Spain with the tourists around you. And, like, surely you want your whole life to be, obviously, evangelistic, and you want to be talking to people every day, you know, say about your experiences or about the gospel. So why does that have to be on a team where you could fundraise and spend lots of money when it could just be on holiday? You know, I don't know. Like, I'm not, like, it's
We have to admit that when it's organised, funded for the sake of evangelism, you get a bit more evangelism done than when you go and sit on the beach in Spain.
No, absolutely. But it's just the idea, like, you know.
You should see his holidays.
We're all mission trips, so. But no, like, it's just the idea, like, you don't have to do this. It doesn't have to be your aim or focus. Because, like, going on holiday and relaxing is good, and you can still tell the person at the pool about Jesus, sort of thing. So, you know, I think that should just naturally be part of your life, and not necessarily like the focus when you're going out. I don't know if that's controversial to say, but.
No, we were going to say that too, like with the balance of that your life should be evangelical, whether you're traveling or working or whatever you're doing.
Just meeting people and learning.
I think they both have it. They both have it part right, but because it's only part right, it becomes wrong for the both of them, and you need to have both sides of it. You can't just say the only thing that's ever going to cross my mind is evangelism, because it's not really effective, because you won't think about relationships. It's all about me shouting at everyone. But you need to have both.
People either. If you're like only saying that, like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm a Christian, it was like, let's run away from this person.
But I would argue you don't need to travel at all.
Yeah.
You're never going to run out of people to talk to about.
Yeah.
Even in Barbados, you know, you're never going to run out of people to talk to about those kind of things. So technically, we don't really have any need to leave these areas if the purpose is to evangelize, because you're not going to reach everyone.
Any other thoughts?
There's the whole idea of like being called to a certain country, but that would be kind of different to just travel. It would be more like moving somewhere, but that obviously involves travel.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Which is more closely related to what these people in the Bible would be moving somewhere to moving from.
Except for Jonah. And Noah. Kind of.
You see on that point, like I really think that's a big thing. It's just like, you know, if you look at missionaries and even in the past 100 years, you know, it's kind of the attitude you go over with your coffin to the country and you decide you're going to live there and die there type of thing. And then nowadays it's all so short term. Like what I don't know, what do you think? Like people saying they feel called to a country, like say Romania, just to go for 2 weeks. Like, is that really like,
Short phone call.
yeah, is that really a calling, or is that just like someone talking, you know, just nonsense? You know, like, can you really be called like to somewhere just for a couple of weeks? Like, I don't know.
What do people think?
Sure, God can do it every once in any space of time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know, it's kind of like, it's the idea, like nowadays we have very little commitment. You know, like
Yeah.
even like just even the past 100 years, as I say, like people will go over and that's it.
Mm.
You know, they're not coming home, and you hear all sorts of missionary stories like that. You know.
I agree that 2 weeks is, from our eyes, definitely from my perspective, borderline. I hesitate to say useless because,
Yeah.
like, from my experience, going to places for a few days, you're a tourist attraction, and you leave, and I said, "Oh, that was interesting." And then 2 weeks later, I said, "Remember that time that white fella came over and said a whole load of junk?" I said, "Yeah, man." Anyways,
Yeah.
Yeah, like practically there's not much you can do in 2 weeks. So if you're going to like build houses or something like.
but at the same time, God can do it every once in any space of time, so you can
Yeah,
have a
it's
massive
not
impact.
wrong.
It's just going back to focus. It's all about you going out away
more
for
about
2
you,
weeks.
yeah.
It's not about like the mission or what people out there. You know, it's partly to do with that, but you know, when you hear most people talk, it's kind of like what they experience.
So,
Yeah, it's
But
just,
I guess like the Great Commission can't really be completed in like in that place. It's not going to be completed in such a short space of time. So your goal wouldn't be the same as someone who was moving there. But you can still be effective, but you would just have a much smaller, more specific goal.
Yeah, you've got a
Maybe
different
that's-
kind of mission in the sense like you're going there, you're going there and getting your eyes opened to what conditions people are living in or what the need for the gospel is, and there are workers there who are addressing that need, and you go in just capacity of encouraging really,
Yeah, and maybe
and
coming
seeing
alongside
and maybe
someone to help,
financial
yeah.
support or something like that, and
I'd say the
to
benefit
give them a break.
the benefit is mostly for the person traveling, not for people he's traveling to.
Yeah.
Because you realize a lot of different things, especially having been out of the country. You learn a lot about those kind of things. But in terms of people there, you're there and gone before they notice, you know.
yeah.
And I suppose we do have to watch that we don't do negative damage by coming in for any length of period if we misunderstand culture. So if we go off and build an orphanage for someone who actually that took it away from the local builders who could have been microfinanced to start a building project, start a career in building and build the orphanage themselves, that would then finance a building infrastructure within a village. Should we have built the orphanage? Well, that's a hard question. That's a but again, yeah, the negative impact's not just are we there for ourselves, but are we actually damaging? And that can be true even for gospel workers who are just there to do evangelism and mission. Are we disempowering the local church? Are we ignoring the local church or whatever? So positives and negatives. And we might come back to some of that practical stuff. So we've talked of, I guess, the extremes of person and but two types of theology, I guess, and for some of you this will be maybe the first time you've heard it. For most of us it won't be. So what I did to start with, we went through Genesis to Revelation, took different examples of different themes that were popping up throughout the Bible, particularly travel, but within it some of you noticed different reoccurring themes. And in Christian circles, this is called biblical theology. So when you've got, say, the theme in Genesis of God creating, will then pop up in virtually every other book of the Bible, all the way through. It's like a tapestry, a thread weaving through the whole of history, and God's keeping on referring back and pointing forward to when He'll recreate, and many things in between that will give glimpses, and some huge pointers, some small pointers. And so that's biblical theology, is traditionally called taking. So a biblical theology of travel in the book of Genesis will look different to a biblical theology of travel in the book of Jude, for example, because different purpose, different time period, different everything, but they still will be connected in some way through this tapestry, and one will shadow the other, or some aspect of what God's doing in one part of the Bible will be a small mirror to something bigger in another part. The other type, without wanting to get too theological, is systematic theology, and both of these are needed in the Christian's life and in church and in everything, and churches struggle to get the balance between them sometimes. Systematic theology, and I think sometimes systematic will help us more for our travel, figuring out how to live as Christians, because biblical theology, we've seen, gives us a picture of what God's up to in the world and gives us a big framework of some of the ways that he works and the rest of it. But systematic theology is a kind of system of thought, as the name suggests. So it takes not just one chapter or one book, or it would take maybe one whole theme. So there we've got sin in a box, and you might ask the question, well, and actually we'll do it now for these different themes. For sin, for creation's another theme, redemption's another theme, being bought back by Jesus, and the new heavens and the new earth when he recreates might be another big Bible theme. How do these different themes interact? Where do we see them? If you were out with your mates traveling the world, where would these themes crop up in your travels? How are they naturally linking in to the big Bible message of these themes as we travel? So why not? We'll just go a group of three. Can you take sin, and where do we see sin in travel, or where could we see sin in travel? Creation, you guys, could you take that, and where do you see it? Not just in the obvious cases, but redemption. The three of you want to take redemption, and then the new heavens and the new earth, or paradise, or whatever we're going to call it. The three of us can work away on that. So take a few minutes. Some will scream obvious, some will be more subtle. Either small instances that you might see as you travel, or bigger things within the whole category of travel. Go for it. We'll feedback a bit on that. Shall we start as we went round? Sin, how are we reminded or not reminded of sin as we travel, or how does travel point us to that or not?
Vegas.
I was like, no, it's fake.
Or Santa Kwanzaa.
Just that we can, we were saying that when you're in a different place and in a different situation and away from, I suppose, people that can keep you in check, you can sometimes feel this elusive sense of freedom, and you just don't want to let the moment kind of pass you by, and you can perhaps just say, just this once, and maybe spend too much or indulge in things that you wouldn't do at home. So for the travel themselves to kind of be involved in the sin, not even like just seeing it, but be a part of it.
Yeah, anonymity of being away, do anything without anyone knowing. Yep. Anything else?
I was just kind of going back to the short-term mission, like kind of selfish we can be, or even on any kind of travelling or holiday, like your attitude would be, what can I squeeze out of this? Like what can I take home with me, as opposed to leave there? So, for example, I'm not going to name someone, but I know a guy that went to Kenya on one of these trips, and someone else told me that he found himself bartering or trying to like haggle this man who was earning his living by selling like sculptures or something. So his attitude was so wrong to go over and try and squeeze as much, or get as much as he could for himself away from this trip. So like for that exact reason, like for being selfish while travelling, you could see it in yourself, I suppose, or in others.
Cool. Yeah, so sin in our own hearts or sin in places or people we go and see. Yep. Creation. What were you saying?
The obvious. You can go over somewhere and see something different and appreciate another part of the world that you just wouldn't have imagined. I guess in your own head, that gives you a better awe of God and stuff. And then it's kind of hard to get many other points, but I suppose the other one you could say is when you go around the world and see so many different people, and like everybody's so unique and different and think so differently and have so many different cultural backgrounds, yet everybody's kind of the same in the fact that they're a sinner that needs saved, all this type of stuff, you know. It sort of give you, a new perspective in God's creation of people. That really is, to be honest.
Cool. Yeah.
We were kind of thinking around the idea of how people go and like find themselves or like
Okay.
kind of come to like, oh,
Go to Israel.
yeah. Or like, being like, oh, it was an amazing trip, my life has changed. But then we were like, that isn't really what redemption means. So
Yeah.
that was,
Yeah.
like redemption is the idea of being bought back. So I don't know. Where did you come from for that?
Yeah, tis a trickier one. But yeah, certainly false examples of, as you say, people trying to might come on to just in a second what redemptive centered travelling looks like. Might come back to it then. We were New Heavens, New Earth. What were you saying?
Basically like the search for the unknown, kind of like the new heaven and the new earth being like, what is out there? What else can I explore? What other part of the world or of Ireland or whatever do I need to see?
And then even when you go there, you know that it's not the same. There's always brand new places to see that you have no idea about, that you're imagining. In a way you can imagine you have a new earth, but whenever you visit these places, they still have the same characteristics of the one we're living in now. So it's always...
There's always going to be a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah, you're not gonna find it here. There's always gonna be something missing from all the places, every place you visit, that the new heaven won't have.
We can fill Instagram accounts of every place on earth and still people keep on posting because every place is constantly changing and constantly different, and it's never fully... I've never met a traveller who sat back and said, oh well, that's all travelling done, there we go. Maybe some people have said for my time in life I am satisfied with the amount of travelling I've done, but very few will conclusively kind of say travel is done, no more need to travel, having but yeah, we can start to look through the lens of different ones, and to be I guess a balanced Christian, to find ourselves doing travel the way God wants travel done and enjoying it to His glory. I guess we're going to have to see through the same gospel lens that we do for everything else in life. And one of those, just finally, I guess, to conclude in a way, is this redemption lens, this kind of cross-centered lens of travel. And I find this the most challenging one for me as a Christian. So much of the rest of this screams out that perhaps as long as I'm not making it my idol of my own heart, as long as I'm not causing others to sin or sinning by actually embarking on my travels, sometimes I think that I'm not doing anything particularly sinful as such here, though the amount I dream of travel, I think sometimes it gets close to an idol. I think most of us grasp that obvious creation wow moment, that bigness of God, that creativity of humankind in light of our Creator. That's something fairly obvious to us. I think most of us grasp that, yes, someday we'll come to a new heavens and a new earth. It'll all be made new. Someday we'll have even greater infinite worlds to explore, and to do so with Christ at the centre, with each other and for His glory. And so, to some extent, most of us grasp something of that we don't need to get all our travelling done here and now, because there's far more. But this cross-centre one, I guess, is a challenge certainly to my heart. Francis and Lisa Chan, it was actually in a book on marriage. Francis and Lisa Chan said, Christians have come up with clever ways to explain why the followers of a suffering servant should live like kings. Christians have come up with very clever ways to make sure to explain why the followers of a suffering servant should live like kings. And I know that's a clamour of my own heart, and I don't know whether you relate to that, that I'm very quick to justify my short-term mission trip in terms of the good I'm doing, or I'm very quick to justify my sister's getting married to a Vanuatu man from the Pacific Islands, to love her well in the gospel, to be supporting my family and being a family representative at that wedding. I'm going to have to go to the Pacific Islands, like it's just a must. And maybe that is true, but at the same time, I've got to feel next December when this happens, is that really done for gospel-hearted motives of loving my family well, loving them well, making the most of that? Or is it just because I fancy a paradise island off in the Pacific Islands for a few weeks in the middle of a rainy Irish winter? It's so hard to tell, isn't it? Our hearts are split down the centre so often. The drag of what we long for in our hearts, but yet some of that is Holy Spirit-led, Jesus-orientated stuff, and some of that so often, if your heart's like mine, isn't. And so I guess that's part of the challenge, isn't it, of travel for us. But one of the ancient writers, was it Homer? I think it was, back in one of the famous Greek texts of old, described a story, and it was, I'm sure, a story that you've heard told before. It was of a chap called Odysseus, and he was on his travels. He was sailing a ship full of people, of crew, and they were always having trouble because these Greek sirens, these beautiful, beautiful Greek mythological woman-like creatures, sang such beautiful songs and looked so beautiful. And every time the boat would go past one of these islands or the rocks where the sirens were, they found the whole crew would find the songs just so beautiful that they couldn't help but stop, and the boat would crash in the rocks, and the journey would be done, and that they'd be long-term kills. And whether it was their eyes or whether it was their ears, hearing and seeing such beauty was just impossible to deal with. And Odysseus thought of different ways that he could stop this. He thought, well, what if I plugged their ears of the crew so they couldn't hear the beautiful, charming sounds of the sirens? What if I asked my crew to tie me to the mast so I couldn't steer the boat over to the rocks where the sirens are? What if I did both of them at the same time? Surely that is going to stop us from crashing the ship on the rocks of the sirens. And so the story goes on like that, and they manage to sail past. But I really, really wonder whether that's our human experience. When I dream of travel, when I go off on my travels, when I hanker after past travels, when I yearn for future travels, will really putting something in my ears and having a hockey ball smash my eye, will that really stop me if I don't see it as well, or don't hear the allure of it? I'm not sure my heart functions like that. I think my heart is far more easily tempted than simply putting something in the way and trying to force myself to forget about it. I think what Jesus says is far more powerful, and I think what Jesus does is to give us a better song to sing, that instead of having to, maybe it's still wise to put those earplugs in or to tie yourself to the mast as you're going past the sirens, but I think far wiser it is to listen to the call of Jesus. And I think the more we listen to that call of Jesus, the more we'll hear a more beautiful song than anything that's ever been sung to us before. The more we'll see someone more beautiful than we've ever seen before. And the more travel in and of itself will seem less of something that we think will fulfill us. And instead it will get put in its proper place. A brilliant thing, a great thing, a thing to enjoy in light of who God is, but not the ultimate thing. So that we don't exchange the glory of God for created things, as Romans 1 tells us to. C.S. Lewis put it beautifully, and I'm sure I've said this many times before in CU stuff. It's one of my favourite Lewis quotations. He says, we're far too easily pleased as humans. We're like people who mess around with sex and alcohol and drugs and the enjoyment of this world, when there's far more infinite joys on offer to us. He says we're like children playing in mud with mud pies in the slum, when there's a paradise on offer at the beach. So he's even using the travel to point us to greater reality, this greater reality of the new heavens and the new earth, something that will really satisfy, something that will truly capture us, our hearts, our minds, our everything. And his prayer is that we're not too easily pleased, that we don't swap the things of this world with the ultimate joys of knowing the creator of all of this, the maker of it all ourselves, that we hear his more beautiful song, that we see him more beautiful. And so what does cross-centered travel look like when you've got Jesus front and center in your life, when his song is the song by which we're living our life by? You'll find the rest hopefully will click into place a certain amount. Maybe it's still good to put those earplugs in, or those tie yourself to the mast in proverbial ways, if you particularly struggle at particular times of year, just spending all your money on travel or whatever it would be. Maybe accountability or whatever would be our equivalent of putting our things in our ears. But certainly let's have Jesus as the more beautiful song. So just want to finish in a way with just a few top tips, and I guess you guys will know as well. How do you shape your travel with that? I've seen many godly examples over the last number of years of how to do things like travel well as a Christian, and I think some of them are obvious stuff that we've named. So there can be mission experiences. So there are people in unreached people groups in the world who've never heard the name of Jesus, and what a great joy it would be to take the gospel to them. We have mission partners in most of our churches. If you don't know who your mission partners are, go and ask your church leaders, and perhaps they'll be able to introduce you over Skype or by email or whatever to some of your folk that you support as a church. Why not, if you're going to just take a restful holiday somewhere, why not go to a part of the world where you know other Christians are struggling, or one of your mission partners is? Do life with them, or have your normal holiday and just pop in with them for a day to encourage them, or bring a parcel out to them from home church or something like that. Many other different ways and different things you can do. I guess everywhere I go, I buy a few postcards, and I generally don't send them straight off because I'm lazy and don't want to pay international postage charges. But I'll buy a postcard from a few postcards from every location, and when I get it 5 minutes free on campus, before meeting one of you guys or before meeting someone, I'll generally quickly scribble either a bit to get people praying for the place. So this is Melilla. It's a Spanish enclave in Morocco. It's the gateway to North Africa. So basically, virtually every Muslim coming home for Ramadan, thousands of them come home through this port to get into North Africa. Freedom of religion because it's Spain, and yet all these unreached people groups travelling through such a significant place, holiday destination to the max, huge input of the gospel into North Africa and the Middle East from places like this. So sometimes I'll just write a postcard, say, hey, I'll just say what I've said to you. Could you just take 30 seconds to pray for this place? And you get people praying across the world for needy situations, and situations that perhaps we can be amazed at how God works. Lucas said another one, we don't need to even leave our campus to do it. Sometimes reaching the nations and our travel experience can start at home. This is Cork International Student Cafe's book from this term, all the nations that are listed. You could flick through and see the number of different flags that are down here, from Saudi Arabia to Iran to Japan to Croatia, Armenia, all the European nations, South America, you name it, the nations are on our doorstep, on our campus, and engaging with them and finding out and nearly having that travel experience within our own campus is nearly possible, and as is somewhat of taking the gospel to them through very simple relational things like setting up the odd international event or doing something like that would connect people in who might be interested and who might never have heard before. So different ways, I guess, that travel can be. I'm sure you have many more ways that travel can be used for the good and for God's glory, and can point to all of it. And perhaps I can encourage you, maybe it's in the people that you travel with, as you travel with your non-Christian friends, or sometimes the obvious things like creation aren't actually the easiest ways to point to Jesus. People are expecting you to come out with cheesy comments about, oh wow, this looks so amazing, maybe God made it, or whatever it be. Not that I'm saying that's wrong to do, but I just tend to find sometimes there's more of a reaction to that than, hey, you come back after a trip and you're just yearning for the next trip, and you're saying, oh, it's like we're just made for something more than this. People are quicker to see sometimes some of the other things, or how travel will never fulfill us. We make it our idol of modern culture, whatever it would be. Sometimes easier to use other things that aren't as obvious at times. So, but I've talked enough. Why not? We'll just spend a couple of minutes more. If you want to go on, I've been spending the last 6 months to a year writing more thoughts on travel as a Christian. Found there's no books really out there along these lines whatsoever, helping us engage with travel and seeing what the Bible picture of travel is. And so if you want to go on and or if you'd be keen to write more from your travel experiences on what travelling as a Christian's like, or anything along the lines of what we've been talking about tonight, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts or get a few hundred words from you on something that you've experienced or think echoes of one of the themes we've been chatting about. But feel free to look through that too. So why not, we'll just turn in 3s and 4s then, and maybe thank God for some of this stuff and pray for our own hearts and pray for our world that we'd have a right response to travels. And maybe could I challenge you, as a bunch of largely whittled down to the Irish now in CU life, going away from this or over tea and coffee, how could you actually take the travels of our visiting students and exchange students as a positive benefit to the CU community and a pointer that could be used by God to bring people to Him if we equip our visiting friends well with a gospel view of travel? How could actually them going off and travelling Ireland or travelling Europe be not just a negative to CU life or to university life, but a real positive that God could use? And I think looking from through His eyes, there are some big positives that could see dramatic things happen in the CU here, if we see it as a bonus and not just as a kind of taking away from CU life. So maybe that's something to go away and chat over more. Would love to explore that more with you all as another semester of exchange student comes in and another semester leaves, and it can be so easy to go with the ups and downs of that. So indeed. So let's turn 3s and 4s and pray in response. So Lord, Father, Son and Spirit, we thank you that you, the triune God, are so big that simply with the word of your mouth you breathed everything into existence, this rich diversity of the world that we live in, the world that we don't even have enough time as an individual to ever explore or fathom, just even a fraction of this world. And yet, Lord, we thank you that you've made it like that. We thank you that you've made us yearning for something more, something bigger, something greater, to something sweeter, a song that will capture our hearts even more fully than the song of creation will do. Lord, would you impress these things on our hearts? Would you show us that you're a good God, you're not a stingy Father who wants to rob us of any pleasure whatsoever, but you're a good God who has given us so much, even those of us who have the least on this earth. And so, Lord, would you help us to live in light of that? Would you give us cross-centered lives, lives that live in light of others, lives that live in light of serving you and serving this world and those in it. Lord, would you teach us what that looks like? Holy Spirit, would you lead us on our knees before you all the days of our life? And would we sharpen each other as we do this as a community together? And even as a community that is so international and so focused on travelling, or would you open our eyes to what it would look like to engage with this campus, with such idols, with such joys and experiences of travel being so central to all of student life? Yes, Lord, open our eyes that we may see as you see the world. In Jesus' name, amen.